Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the video blog that we have with Fundación Rafael del Pino. Today we're going to talk about the economics of climate change, the economics of decarbonization, and all the things that are included with it, the challenges and the opportunities. If we think about the economics of decarbonization, we need to think about assets and liabilities. And we need to think as well of the risks to all of those countries, producers of raw materials, commodities, oil, etc., in which the economy is maybe 60 to 90% dependent on those commodities. So we need to address the issues of climate change without forgetting the millions of people that could suffer from interventionist policies. We need also to think of the ways to improve everything that has to do with the environment from the perspective of the three things that are always going to lead to an improvement. First, technology. Second is competition. And the third is a global approach. Okay? If we look at technology, we need to understand that the process of decarbonization is already happening. It's already happening in front of us, as we are seeing with the fact, that the commodity index and so many of the traditionally inflationary commodities are still in very subdued prices despite the growth in the economy. The level of energy intensity of the global economy has come down dramatically. So the amount of energy that is needed in order to generate 1 unit of GDP has come drastically down. And that is a great thing. And we need to be very aware of it as a positive to start from. Second, the global growth in emissions continues to happen, but it's much lower than what the economic growth would suggest, and that is a positive. So we're not just seeing that growth in emissions per capita is reducing in developing countries, but emissions per capita per se are also coming down in developed economies. That is also a very strong positive. We also know that the only way in which a successful decarbonization process is going to happen is if we rely on a competitive energy policy. And that needs to take into account that you cannot just try to reduce carbon emissions through taxation, which basically is benefiting from the use of and the generation of CO2 emissions. What you need to do is to improve competition in order to generate much higher efficiency and to generate much higher levels of improvement in the environment. Even if we look, for example, at the United States, the United States has been able to reduce carbon emissions at the same time as reducing household bills for electricity and gas, thanks to the competition between natural gas and renewables. That is the way that we need to move forward. We cannot put to the world a process of decarbonization of the economy that is not absolutely and completely successful. It needs to be such a level of success that it is something that emerging markets, that developing economies will accept. Because the rich countries, thanks to the access to massive debt, may be happy about growing 1% less or having a little bit more of unemployment because they are already rich and they're already developed. That is not a luxury that emerging markets and developing economies have. Therefore, what we need to propose is something that is unquestionably successful. And that can only come if companies that are already doing a lot more for efficiency, for technology, for the improvement of the environment, lead the process instead of governments. Why? Not because governments are evil, but because governments do not receive any incentive from or any positive outcome from the main factors that come with decarbonization. First, lower inflation. Second, lower tax revenues. Higher efficiency, higher energy efficiency, lower utilization of commodities, lower utilization of industrial capital. All of those things are disinflationary and disinflationary in tax revenues. Governments don't like that. Governments don't like as well the fact that the disruptive technologies take away a lot of the power of governments in controlling the economy. So we need to be very aware that just because of the incentives existing already in the economy, it is very, very difficult for governments to truly defend disruptive technologies and a change in the growth pattern. But companies are already doing it. And therefore, a process that is led by companies and with governments put together, showing economic agents, citizens, households that there are clear benefits in cost savings, in efficiency, in their own access to goods and services, all of those things, then can be exported globally and successfully, helping countries that currently have too much of a reliance on commodity revenues to change their growth pattern and to improve the growth pattern. It can only come from that perspective. It can only come from much higher levels of growth and productivity. And we need to address that, and we need to address that quickly. Because if not, what we will likely see is a backlash from the developing economies that say we cannot afford to take the risks that the rich European countries decide to take without taking any regard about employment or about growth. The growth, economic growth, competitiveness, efficiency, and technology must be key factors to generate a successful change in the economic growth pattern. Finally, climate change does have important financial risk that we need to understand. First is obviously in the financial sectors like insurance. Second, also in the valuation of many of the industrial conglomerates that are based on reserves, etc. And finally, we also need to understand that those things are not going to be addressed properly if we don't put together all of the measures that are going to allow the disruptive technologies to thrive quickly and generate the level of competitiveness that is going to make a change of growth pattern acceptable and beneficial for everyone. Remember that the key factor is to reduce poverty. We have been able to reduce poverty globally to the lowest levels in history, and that needs to continue. We cannot just say, oh, we've done enough and the developing economies need to forget about poverty. Poverty and economic growth is something that cannot be stripped away from an economic viewpoint of climate change. Thank you very much.